I'm sure you've heard it by now. One of ESPN's most beloved and respected anchors died Sunday, and sports enthusiasts across the country are mourning his loss. Stuart Scott will be remembered for his colorful catchphrases, which struck a chord with millions of sports fans. He'll also be remembered for his courageous battle against cancer. Stuart Scott was just 49 years old.
When you die, that does not mean that you lose to cancer. You beat cancer by how you live, why you live, and in the manner in which you live. So live, fight like hell. And when you get too tired to fight, then lay down and rest and let somebody else fight for you.
Joining us to discuss Stuart Scott's life and legacy are sports journalist Brandon Robinson, who writes for The Source magazine, and we also have on the phone ESPN NBA reporter Chris Broussard. Hello, both of you gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Chris, I appreciate you calling in as well. My condolences to both of you. You both had relationship with him. Chris, I know that you knew him very well. So let me start with you. Can you talk a little bit about how Stuart Scott changed sports broadcasting style? Because he was quite a colorful and engaging personality.
Yes, he was. He completely changed it. There's no doubt about it. He revolutionized it. And what he did was he opened the door for African Americans in broadcasting in sports to really kind of do it their way. Obviously, there are some African Americans who do it in the more traditional sense, but there are others who want to bring the urban or the hip hop, or even at times even brought church culture into the broadcasting. And before Stuart, the African-American sports broadcasters had to really conform to the traditional way of doing things. And he came in and he used phrases from rap music, phrases from the church, as I said, you know, and I get a witness from the congregation, and the Lord said, rise up, and things like that. And, you know, he opened the doors, like I said, for a lot of black reporters to just kind of breathe themselves and bring their culture into their reporting. I really believe that without Stuart Scott, there would not be a Charles Barkley, who certainly is non-traditional, and a Stephen A. Smith.
I want to bring Brandon into this conversation. Chris, stay on the line. And you were talking about some of those phrases. Of course, we all know booyah, and cool is the other side of the pillow. I love that.
And what happened was?
What happened was, oh, I didn't make that up. Okay. You met Stuart Scott in your first internship.
Well, actually, I was visiting a friend, and she called me, and she worked at VH1, my friend Jasmine. She said, Brandon, come to VH1. This was when I finished undergrad, and you know, I met Stuart, and you know, after he did some tape in there, we just had a conversation for about 15, 20, 30 minutes just about life. You know, what are your plans? How do you prepare? Same way Chris and I have those conversations, and you know, just really took the time. Anybody that ever met Stuart would always say that he made you feel like, you know, he was at home, and that transited on camera as well. You know, and to add to a point that Chris made, you know, he talked about the hip hop references. As much as that's important, he also had he developed his shtick after, you know, being a Predator, starting out in South Carolina, you know, shooting, editing, and being on camera, and he, you know, over time just building his craft, and you know, he worked on the mechanics first before you saw the flair and the finesse and all that stuff over time. You know, a lot of kids see that stuff, but you know, he stuck to the nuts and bolts and nitty gritty first.
Yeah, and Chris, I believe, and I think we can all agree on this. You know, that it's one thing to measure a person's character and grit, how they live their life. I think it says something completely different about them when you watch them face their own mortality. And Stuart fought this battle with cancer for a long time, for 7 years. And I understand you have an amazing story of your experience with him while he was going through the throes of cancer. Tell us about that.
Well, it was just, I mean, he was such an inspiration, and I didn't see him a lot when he was going through it, but the times I did see him, he was such an inspiration because he really kept aggressively attacking life. Like, he refused to let the cancer keep him from doing anything he wanted to do. And he may have even got even more adventurous when the cancer struck him. You know, he came into work all the time, didn't take the time off that he really could have. He worked as hard as he ever did. And beyond that, I mean, he was working out, doing MMA workouts. You know, he wasn't fighting professionally MMA, but his workouts, he worked out MMA style with MMA trainers, learning how to fight, you know, in the MMA rings and stuff like that. And I was just amazed at it that, you know, he stayed physically fit and took care of his body and kept doing aggressive, athletic things until the end. I mean, he really, that was such an inspiration. You know, I'm not doing MMA training, and I'm healthy, you know.
Yeah, that is incredible. You know, Brandon, before we have to go, let me just ask you, you know, so many times we know people and the personality they present on camera, and it's not always consistent with who they are off camera. Tell us a little bit about who the off-camera Stuart.
Stand-up guy. You know, if you ever reached out to him and asked him for advice, he would be there to give it to him. A lot of young journalists, you know, they grew up looking up to Stuart because he had those references and stuff like that. But as cool as he was on camera, he was as calm and just was welcoming off camera. You know, a lot of young journalists, they want to be him, and he would often just really take the time to really sit and talk to him, and he made you feel like you were related to him. I felt like he was my cousin.
Great loss to sports broadcasting, a great loss to journalism, loss to the world. Chris Broussard, Brandon Robinson, thank you both. I appreciate you.